Hello, and welcome back to the William Gomez podcast. I am William Gomes, and I am grateful to have you here. Today, we explore one of the most important ideas in Lacanian psychoanalysis, something that sits quietly behind our words, our desires, and our understanding of the world. This idea is the big other. At first, the phrase might sound mysterious or distant, but the big other is something each of us encounters every day. It is woven into the language we speak, the rules we follow, the roles we inhabit, and the meanings we use to make sense of life. The big other is the background structure of human reality. In this episode, we will explore what the big other is, how it shapes us, how it influences desire, and how becoming aware of it can deepen our understanding of ourselves. My goal is to guide you through this idea gently so that by the end of the episode, you will see the big other not as an abstract concept, but as a living structure that quietly shapes the world you move through each day. Let us begin by clarifying what the big other is not. The big other is not a person. It is not a parent, teacher, partner, or authority figure. It is not an individual, even though individuals sometimes seem to represent it. The big other is the entire symbolic order, the network of language, rules, norms, and expectations that existed long before we arrived. It is the world of shared meanings, the place where things make sense because others recognize them too. When a child is born, they enter a world that is already structured by language. Before they can speak, they are spoken about. Before they understand, they are named. The words spoken around them come from the big other. These words carry meanings that shape the child's identity and place in the world. The big other gives the child their first coordinates. It tells them through language and interaction who they are, where they belong, and what is expected. Language is one of the clearest ways the big other appears. When we speak, the words we use do not come from us alone. They come from the symbolic order. They come from a world in which words already exist, meanings are already shared, and grammar is already defined. Even when we try to express something deeply personal, we use the vocabulary given to us by the big other. This is why we sometimes find it difficult to express what we truly feel. The big other shapes what can be said and what cannot yet be spoken. The big other also appears through rules, laws, and cultural norms. The structures tell us what is allowed, what is forbidden, and what is valued. They shape our sense of right and wrong, success and failure, respect and shame. The big other defines these categories long before we can evaluate them for ourselves. When we feel guilty or inadequate because we believe we have fallen short of a certain standard, we are responding to the voice of the big other. The big other also assigns us roles. From the moment we are named, we are placed into a network of social positions. Child, sibling, student, friend, partner, parent, citizen. Each role carries expectations. These expectations come from the symbolic order, not from our individual story. They shape how others relate to us and how we relate to ourselves. When we feel pressure to act a certain way, it is often the big other speaking through the roles we inhabit. One of the most striking features of the big other is that it gives us meaning. It tells us how to interpret the world. When something surprising or confusing happens, we often turn to shared language and shared frameworks to make sense of it. The big other provides these frameworks. It creates a world where events can be understood, where actions can be evaluated, and where emotions can be named. But the big other does not only give meaning, it also shapes desire. Desire is not simply a private feeling, It emerges in the space between ourselves and others. When we desire something, we often desire what we believe the big other values. We want to be recognized, admired, or accepted within the symbolic world. We want to feel that we matter. We want to belong. This is why Lacan said that desire is the desire of the other. It means that desire is shaped by the symbolic order. We long for what appears meaningful within our cultural and relational world. We want what seems desirable to others, or what we imagine will give us a place in their eyes. When we ask ourselves why we want something, we may discover that our desire carries the imprint of the big other. The big other also influences how we see ourselves. We measure ourselves according to standards given by the symbolic order. We judge our worth based on qualities that are culturally valued. We compare ourselves to others because the big other sets the rules for comparison. When we feel proud or ashamed, hopeful or discouraged, these feelings are often shaped by the voice of the big other echoing inside us. It is important to understand that the big other is not perfect. It is not omniscient. It does not know everything. Although it feels powerful, the big other has gaps and contradictions. It contains expectations that clash with each other. It changes over time, it offers guidance, but it also fails. When the big other fails to provide meaning or clarity, we may feel disoriented, we may feel anxious or uncertain because the structure we rely on has revealed its limits. For example, when a child asks a question that adults cannot answer, the child discovers that the big other does not know everything. When someone faces a crisis that the usual cultural narratives cannot explain, the big other seems silent. When a social or cultural system becomes unstable, people may lose trust in the symbolic order. These moments can be unsettling because they reveal that the big other is not an absolute authority. It is a human construction. It is shaped by history, culture, and the shifting values of communities. Anxiety often appears when the big other fails. Anxiety rises when meaning breaks down, when the rules no longer hold, or when we feel unprotected by the symbolic order. Anxiety is a sign that we have encountered the limits of the big other. It is not a personal failure. It is a structural moment when the symbolic framework cannot contain what is happening. The big other also plays a role in fantasy. Fantasy creates a story that answers the question, what does the other want from me? Fantasy offers a picture of our place in the symbolic world. It helps us navigate desire and manage the real. But fantasy relies on the big other to provide the stage on which this story unfolds. The big other sets the background, the rules of the story, and the structure that fantasy builds upon. Fantasy allows us to imagine how we belong, how we matter, and how we are seen. But because fantasy depends on the big other, it can also be shaped by the values and expectations of the symbolic order. When we imagine ourselves fulfilling a certain role, achieving a certain kind of success, or attracting a certain kind of love, we are often imagining these things through the lens of the big other. The big other also shapes identification. Identification, as we discussed in the last episode, is the process through which we become who we believe we are, but the images and signifiers we identify with come from the symbolic order. We identify with roles, ideals, and qualities that the big other presents as meaningful. Our sense of self is built from the material the big other provides. It is through the big other that we learn what it means to be strong, gentle, ambitious, kind, or responsible. These qualities do not arise in isolation. They are formed within a cultural and relational context. We identify with them because they make sense within the symbolic world we inhabit. Understanding the big other also helps us recognize why it can be difficult to change our beliefs about ourselves. When we try to shift an identification or desire, we are not only changing ourselves, we are challenging the symbolic framework that shaped us. This can feel like stepping into unfamiliar territory. It can feel risky because it means confronting the big other and its influence. Yet recognizing the power of the big other can also be liberating. When we understand that many of our beliefs, desires, and fears come from the symbolic order, not from an inner truth, we gain freedom. We can begin to question these beliefs. We can ask whether they truly serve us. We can soften their hold. We can create space for new values, new desires, and new identifications to emerge. The big other is not an enemy. It is part of the human condition. It allows us to communicate, to understand one another, and to share meaning. It gives us a place in a world that would otherwise feel chaotic. But when we become aware of its influence, we can relate to it with more clarity. We can recognize that the big other is not absolute. It is not a fixed authority. It is a symbolic structure that can be changed, challenged, and reinterpreted. The big other also helps us understand the complexity of social life. Institutions, systems, and cultural norms can feel powerful because they represent the big other. When the systems function well, they provide stability. When they fail, we experience collective uncertainty. Understanding the big other allows us to approach these moments with awareness rather than confusion. As we come toward the end of this episode, let us take a moment to reflect on what the big other offers us. It provides meaning, structure, and connection. It shapes how we speak, feel, desire, and relate, but it also challenges us to recognize that meaning is not fixed. The big other can change, and so can we. In becoming aware of the big other, we do not step outside of it. That is impossible, but we step into a more thoughtful relationship with it. We begin to question what we took for granted. We begin to see the places where the symbolic order restricts us, and we also see the places where it supports us. In the next episode, we will explore the idea of the name of the Father, a symbolic function that helps organize meaning, desire, and the structure of the family. This idea will help us deepen our understanding of how authority, law, and symbolic limits take shape within the psyche. But for now, I hope this reflection on the big other helps you see your relationship to language, culture, and meaning with fresh eyes. We all live within the symbolic order. We all navigate its expectations, and we all have the capacity to question, reshape, and reinterpret the structures that guide our lives. Thank you for listening. This is the William Gomez Podcast. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and I will speak with you again soon